I should have never come back. Not after everything I'd heard, after what the old ones whispered in the corners. The stories that seemed older than the stones of the convent of Nossa Senhora do Desterro, up on the hill. But curiosity, it's always been stronger than any sense of self-preservation. It was 1873, and Florianópolis was still called Desterro. The narrow cobblestone streets carried tales no one dared to speak aloud. Not after dusk settled over the southern bay. The sails of the boats flickered on the horizon, but their light seemed far too weak to fight what lurked in the shadows. And that's where it all began, right there, in the bowels of this island. When I was a child, I'd hear about an old curse. They said it had been cast by those who came before the Portuguese, a plague that had turned the island into a cursed land, although its effects were only felt by those who dared to question the island's secrets. And how I questioned. My palms were sweating just thinking about what awaited me, but my mind couldn't escape that dark past. My investigation started at the public market. The smell of fresh fish mixed with that of dried herbs, and the conversations of the fishermen turned into cursed murmurs when the subject of Desterro Island came up. There was something everyone seemed to avoid, a hidden truth among those stalls, under the shadows of the narrow corridors. "You're a fool to mess with that boy." The words came from an old shrimp seller, with deep-set eyes and a great beard. He was one of the few who remembered the story no one wanted to tell. Something about the disappearance of 3 families in the last century. Something about what happened on the darkest nights, when the wind brought voices from the ocean. "They're still here, trapped. They can't leave." He coughed, his eyes vacant, staring at nothing. "And you'll find them, if you keep going." I laughed, a nervous chuckle, pretending not to believe him. But my stomach turned, and part of me knew the old man was serious. The trails leading up to the convent were steep, lonely, with ancient trees that whispered to the wind, as if ancestral secrets were etched into their bark. I climbed for hours, feeling the weight of the air growing almost suffocating. When I reached the top, there it was, imposing, the convent of Nossa Senhora do Desterro, its walls covered in moss and gates that looked sealed for centuries. It was there, before the great wooden door, that I heard it for the first time. A low lament like a whisper from beyond. Cold. Cruel. It was a woman's voice, just hanging in the air. A chill ran down my spine. What was once mere curiosity now turned into dread. I entered. I don't know how, but the door gave way as if it had been waiting for me. The inside was vast, but empty. Every step I took echoed through the walls, as if I were being followed by invisible ghosts. In the center of the hall stood an old stone statue of a woman with an indistinct face, watching me from a crumbling altar. I didn't recognize the figure. It wasn't a saint, not one I knew. And her eyes, though formless, seemed to be watching me. Then the ground shook. A crack formed, a rift in the center of the room. From it, an unmistakable sound emerged, voices. Muffled screams, as if someone or something had been buried there for centuries. My instinct screamed to run, but something held me back. A name I had never heard before, but that now echoed in my mind. Maria Clara. At that moment, the ground beneath my feet completely split open, throwing me into the abyss. And there, at the bottom, I saw them. They were trapped, the souls of the 3 families, not in bodies, but in something worse, in shadows, caught between the world of the living and the dead, unable to leave. They surrounded me, silent, their mouths moving, but with no sound. It was then that I noticed the second name, etched into the walls of the rift, mine. "No, this can't be," I whispered, stepping back, but there was nowhere to go. An invisible force pulled me, dragging me toward the center of that darkness, as if my fate was already sealed. A woman appeared before me. She was not human. Her face was distorted, a reflection of suffering and rage. Her eyes, lifeless, soulless, pierced into my mind. She was Maria Clara, the woman from the legend, the reason behind the curse. And then, in a cold whisper, she said, "Now you belong to me." I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst, but the impact never came. When I opened them again, I was back at the top of the hill, in front of the convent. Everything seemed normal. The market, the streets, the smell of fish. But something had changed. Since that day, the voices have never left me. They whisper in my ears, reminding me that my name is carved into that rift, that my soul is marked. And sometimes, when the wind blows strong from the sea, I can hear Maria Clara's laments calling out for me.
Year 1874. Ouro Preto, Minas Gerais. I had only been in the city for a few days, as part of an academic mission to study the region's geology, under the supervision of the engineer Marco de Souza, a renowned figure in Brazil's mineral exploration. He had mentioned something about forgotten ruins hidden deep within the thick forests of the Itacolomi mountain range, a place shrouded in mystery and fear among the locals. Speaking of that place, known as the Refuge of the Cursed Gold, would bring discomfort and hushed murmurs. "You've heard of the curse, haven't you?" Marco asked one evening as we walked through Praça Tiradentes, under the dim yellow light of street lamps. He wasn't a man of superstitions, but there was a seriousness in his tone that intrigued me. They say the gold the Bandeirantes couldn't take still holds its revenge. I didn't have time for legends. My mission was clear, and the next morning we set out for the location. Marco accompanied me to the edge of the forest, but refused to go any further. "This is where sanity ends," he said, turning back to the city. Stubborn, I pushed on alone, guided by old maps that indicated an abandoned mine. The trails were narrow, and the trees closed in like the forest itself was trying to stop me. The atmosphere was thick, heavy, as if the air was infused with ancient, suffocating memories. That's when I saw the first ruins. They were stone structures, consumed by time and overgrown with plants. Something about the place felt weird. The silence there was unnatural. It wasn't the quiet of solitude or abandonment. It was a suffocating void, as if the world around it had forgotten the existence of this place. Inside the main ruin, I found a small altar. On it, a cracked clay bowl and what appeared to be raw gold, corroded, filthy. Abruptly, a shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. My heart began to race and I felt a sudden nausea. Something was watching me. Local stories said that the slaves had hidden the gold from the Bandeirantes, and that the men who tried to reclaim it were never seen again. They vanished without a trace. Rationally, I dismissed these tales, but there was an uncomfortable truth in those legends when you stood there, alone, where it all happened. I continued to explore the ruins. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, and then I saw him. A man or something resembling one, standing atop the ruins watching me. His face was hidden under an old hood, and he didn't move. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to speak, but my voice was swallowed by the thick air. I blinked, and he was gone. That's when I realized I was trapped. The path I had followed to get there was different. The trees seemed to have shifted, and the ruins, once a fixed landmark, now seemed to spin around me. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, but the footsteps behind me were constant, relentless. I didn't look back. I knew something was following me. Night fell quickly, and with it came the sound, a distant, deep chant, echoing through the mountains. It wasn't human, and it froze me in place. I felt my body grow heavy, my legs refusing to move. When I looked toward the horizon, I saw the city of Ouro Preto, but not as I had left it. It was bathed in a golden glow, but it wasn't gold that shone. It was something darker, like fire buried beneath layers of earth. Something had awakened. The sound grew closer, and with it came the figures. Men and women, but their skin was fused with gold, melted into something unrecognizable. They moved slowly, as if every step was a torture. But there was no pain in their eyes, only emptiness. I fought to get away. My thoughts were in chaos, and every time I looked up, the hooded man was closer. He was hunting me. And around his cloak, small gold coins fell to the ground, corroded as if marking the path of the curse. Somehow, I reached the edge of the forest. When I looked back, the ruins were calm, as if nothing had happened, but I knew that nothing was the same anymore. I returned to the city, but Marco was gone. No one even remembered him. His house was locked, and the records that mentioned his name had vanished. It was as if time itself had erased him. I felt a deep unease, but I still tried to convince myself it was all coincidence, until the next morning. I woke up to a note slipped under my door, written in handwriting I recognized immediately. You found the gold. Now it has found you.
I never believed in legends. Growing up in the heart of Rio de Janeiro, surrounded by the busy streets and the sounds of an ever-growing city, those old tales seemed like distant whispers from a past I was no part of. But now, as I sit here, trembling, haunted by something I can't explain, I know better. It all started with the railway project that cut through the Tijuca forest. It was 1908. The city was changing fast. Old neighborhoods were being modernized, streets expanded. I was assigned to a crew responsible for a new stretch of tracks running dangerously close to the untouched wilderness of Tijuca. They warned us, of course. The elders, the ones who had lived there before the city swallowed the land, spoke of an ancient curse. Boithatha, they called it, a serpent of fire that guarded the forest. I laughed at the time, brushing it off as nonsense. After all, we had machines, manpower, and progress on our side. What harm could an old story do? The first sign of trouble came when Jamie disappeared. He was one of our best men, strong, silent, the kind that doesn't scare easy. One morning, he simply didn't show up for work. Maybe he ran off with that money, someone joked. But Jamie wasn't the kind to run. That evening, I went with 2 others to check his shack, deep in the forest. We found nothing except a strange burnt patch in the ground, as if something scorching had passed through, leaving the earth blackened. No one dared speak of it aloud, but I saw the fear in their eyes. As the days went by, the nights became more unsettling. There was something in the air, a tension, a whispering hum that seemed to follow us everywhere. Then one night it came. I was asleep in my tent when I heard it, a low crackling sound like dry leaves catching fire. When I stepped outside, I saw it. At first, it seemed like just a small glow far off in the forest, flickering between the trees. But it grew, fast. The fire wasn't spreading like you'd expect. It moved as if alive, darting between the trunks, bending and twisting as though it were searching for something or someone. "Run!" I heard one of the men shout, but my legs wouldn't move. I stood frozen, staring at the unnatural flame that took the form of a great serpent, writhing and coiling, its body glowing with an intense, otherworldly light. And then it locked eyes with me, or at least that's what it felt like. The thing had no face, no eyes, but I swear it saw me. In an instant, the flames surrounded our camp. My men screamed, their voices cutting off as the heat engulfed them. But there was no sound of burning flesh, no smell of smoke, just a deafening silence and that terrible glow. When it was over, they were gone, and only that blackened earth remained. I ran. I don't know how long or how far, but I ran until I reached the city. No one believed me, of course. Who would? A man raving about a serpent of fire in the middle of a construction site. They said I was delusional, that I'd imagined it, but deep down I knew. The forest had claimed them, and I had escaped only by some cruel twist of fate. Weeks passed, and the project was halted. The officials blamed structural issues, but I knew the truth. I tried to put it behind me, but the nightmares began soon after. Every night I saw the flames. Every night I heard the crackling, that sound of burning, but never any heat, just cold terror. And then came the final blow. I was walking down Rua do Ouvidor when I saw him, Jane, or at least what was left of him. He stood at the far end of the street, eyes vacant, his skin pale and thin like parchment. His lips didn't move, but I heard his voice in my head, "It's coming for you." Before I could react, he vanished into the crowd, leaving behind only the faint smell of burnt earth. I know now that there's no escaping it. The forest will have its due. They say progress always comes at a cost, but no one warned us of this. The Boithatha isn't just a legend, and I'm afraid it's not done with me yet. Every night I see that glow growing closer. I can hear the crackling in the distance, even in the heart of the city. And when it finally reaches me, I know I'll vanish just like the others.